Just give us a minute to confirm that we are live.
I apologize. Anybody else having an issue with onboard firing up this morning?
I was a little slow myself, but I'm here now.
Right.
I'm sorry, I
Okay,
didn't. We're good.
we are live, yes.
Okay, well, thank you. Good morning to everyone. Thank you for joining us today. It sounds like this is a good day to be virtual with the forecast that I keep hearing about. So we will call the meeting to order. I have it's 8:59. Oh my, we're early. How unusual. And welcome. At the top of your agenda, you do see that there are a number of announcements, and I just wanted to highlight that the Maple Syrup Festival is scheduled for early April, the 6th of April. So, if you have an opportunity to take that in, that would be awesome. Today, the land acknowledgement is going to be shared by Councillor Baines. So I will turn it over to Councillor Baines. Thank you for doing that.
Thank you, Chair Little. The Nottawasaga Valley Conservation Authority Board acknowledges that we are situated on the traditional land of the Anishinaabe people. The Anishinaabe include the Ojibwe, Odawa, and Potawatomi nations, collectively known as the Three Fires Confederacy. We are dedicated to honoring Indigenous history and culture and committed to moving forward in the spirit of reconciliation and respect with all First Nation, Métis, and Inuit people.
Great, thank you very much. So if there are any declarations of pecuniary interest, you may make them now or at any time throughout our meeting. I don't know that there are any today. And then we will start with our motions. Once again, because we're virtual, we will be using online, on board for our voting. So if you can do that, if you have problems, hand signals will also work. Also, because it's an online agenda, that there are movers and seconders already pre-assigned. So as we go through, we will call on those movers and seconders. If you have any problems, then you don't wish to be a mover or seconder for a particular motion, just let us know. So our first motion is the motion to approve the agenda, and I have that it's moved by Mayor Anderson and seconded by Councillor Baines. So be it resolved that the agenda for the Board of Directors meeting number 0224 BOD dated March the 23rd, 2024 be approved. And before we just move there, I just wanted to point out that we did send an additional document this morning, the transition guidelines. So I hope everyone received that. So if everyone is able, could you please go to your onboard to approve the agenda motion?
Councilor Shell has to use his hand signal. Sorry.
Sorry, I too mine was very delayed for some reason. It just seemed to be stuck in place and didn't want to move forward.
Through the chair, the motion has carried.
Thank you. So next, we have any announcements that, as you see attached to your agenda is the 2023 annual report. Again, a very well put together, colorful document with lots of wonderful pictures of the activities that happen throughout the watershed. Are there any other announcements that anyone wishes to put forward? I don't see anything. So we have presentations is next. This morning, Tyler Mahal, our planner, will be going through the regulation changes. So I will call on Tyler if he's here.
Yeah, through the chair, Tyler's just getting logged on, but this will be a joint presentation with myself and Tyler.
Okay, that's awesome. Thank you.
He should be on any moment now.
That's great. That's fine. Thank you.
Through the chair, I am present.
Great. Welcome, Tyler. So I will turn it over to you and to Manager Kroll to go through this item.
Excellent. Well, I'm going to kick things off with the first series of changes within the new regulation. So as of April 1st, we're going to see the enactment of OREG 41-24, and this will also coincide with the proclamation of associated sections within the Conservation Authorities Act. Next slide, please. So while this regulation change represents a single regulation across all conservation authorities, so now each of the conservation authorities, they have their own regulation, and this will be a standard regulation just to improve consistency among conservation authorities. And much of the conservation authorities' regulatory processes and requirements will remain mostly the same. And with this legislative and regulatory change, the authority is required to update their policies and guideline documents to include additional details regarding pre-submission consultation processes, as well as procedures respecting the review process, and standard timelines for the authority to make decisions on permit applications following the notification of a complete application to the applicant. These changes also closely align with Ontario's flooding strategy. Some of the different goals and objectives within that strategy are to increase public health and safety, reduce damage to the private property and the environment, as well as keeping people and property safe from natural hazards. Next slide, please. So the CA Act outlines the legal requirements for conservation authorities' decisions for a permit application. The Act includes two subsections which provide the tests or criteria that a permit application must meet to the satisfaction of conservation authorities. These tests include flooding, erosion, dynamic beaches, unstable soils, and bedrock. So the tests of the regulation that have been removed are conservation of land, as well as pollution. Next slide, please. These are the changes to the definitions within the regulation. The definition, some of the big ones, or the most significant one in our mind, is the reduction of the area of interference to wetlands. So this is regardless of the significance of the wetland, whether it's a provincially significant wetland, it will all be 30 meters across the board. Another significant change is the definition of a watercourse. We don't see this having any real significant changes to our regulation mapping. Everything is going to stay the same. It'll just be if the drainage area is under 50 hectares and there's a watercourse. If there's no associated floodplain with it, then in those cases, some areas may be taken out of the regulated area. Next slide, please. So with regards to our mapping, the authority, we need to update our mapping to reflect these regulatory changes with the limits that we're going to be regulating around wetlands. Some of the criteria that are outlined within the regulation is the frequency in which authorities must update their mapping. So mapping must be updated or looked at least once annually. And the review of maps and the areas, it must be provided made available to the public. And depending on the significance of the changes, there may be a component for public stakeholder engagement as well to make them aware of these changes. And one important detail to note that in the interim, before we've got our updated mapping in place, the text of the regulation will always prevail. So if the regulation says we have a 30-meter area of interference, that's what we're going to be regulating, not what is shown currently on our mapping, which would be the 120-meter. Next slide, please. Another significant change with this regulation are the exceptions, works that no longer require a permit from the Conservation Authority. So our regulation outlines specific activities. We'll need to outline the activities that will not require a permit. So we need to update our fee policy. Currently stipulates all the activities that no longer require permits from the authority. So some of these changes include non-habitable accessory structures that are 160 square feet or 15 square meters. This is also consistent with the building code sizes, so it's better aligns from that perspective. Unenclosed detached decks or patios that are not located within a watercourse or a wetland. So it's interesting that they've added that wording in there as well, which doesn't include any erosion hazards in there. And seasonal floating docks that are 10 square meters, they do not require a permit, and there's no supporting structures that are associated with those. Tile drains that are not within wetlands or watercourses within 30 meters of a wetland or 15 meters within a watercourse. Offline ponds for livestock that is not connected to or within a watercourse or wetland. Infield erosion that is not within or do not have any outlets directly connected to a watercourse, wetland, or river valley system. Any works on private laneways, as long as they're outside of the wetland and do not extend or widen, and the elevation, bedding materials, and the existing culverts are not altered. For public roads, as long as it is not extended or widened, and the elevation, bedding material, and existing culverts are not altered. And for any municipal drain repair under the DART protocol, as long as the works are being carried out in accordance with the mitigation requirements set out in the DART protocol. For non-habitable garages with no basements, as long as the reconstruction does not exceed the existing footprint of the garage and does not allow for a change in the potential use of the garage to create habitable space. Next slide, please. So with regards to pre-consultation, this is something that we've tried to adapt our system to recommend it to applicants because we know the benefit it has. It really streamlines the review process when we get these complete applications right at the onset. So this new regulation speaks to pre-consultation very specifically. The regulation includes the minimum requirements for conservation authorities regarding pre-submission requirements and process for the permit applications. It is recommended that prior to submitting any applications under the regulation, the authority engage with the applicant in pre-consultation for the purpose of confirming the requirements of a complete application to obtain a permit for whatever the works they're proposing. This can take various different forms in terms of pre-consultation. It can be something that is sent out. We can have this virtually, or it can be in person. Typically, the request would come from the applicant to the authority. Initial information on the proposed activities, such as the description of the works and associated plans, must be provided by the applicant in order to have a meaningful discussion during pre-consultation, as well as details about the property, which the activities are being proposed to be carried out on, and any copies of any maps or surveys that they may have. Any meetings between the authority and the applicant prior to the submission of an application may include site visits in some cases. And if the applicant requests a pre-consultation under the regulation, the authority is required now to engage in pre-consultation. But this is something that we've always entertained previously, and that we're going to continue to do moving forward. So no real significant changes there. Next slide, please. So there has been some changes to what was required in order to deem an application complete. It's more an enhanced application requirements. And once an application is deemed complete, the NVCA can no longer ask for any further studies or drawings unless it's agreed upon by the applicant. So what we found just through the course of review and what we've seen has been the most effective and efficient for our own internal plan review is good pre-consultation with the applicant and getting a complete submission of the permit application, including all the necessary information. Typically that was discussed during the pre-consultation process, as well as good quality applications, including the submission of all components that's required. And these are the kind of the three key things that we need to see for any application to move through the process efficiently and effectively. Next slide, please. So there is a limitation on the permit conditions that we can apply to a permit. So conservation authorities can apply conditions of approval to a permit. These conditions must adhere to and form part of the decision to in order to issue a permit under the Conservation Authorities Act. An authority may attach conditions on a permit issued only if it is in the opinion of the authority that conditions assist in preventing or mitigating effects on the control of flooding, erosion, dynamic beaches, unstable soils or bedrock, the 5 tests, the regulation. They assist in preventing, mitigating any effects on human health, safety, or damage or destruction of property in the event of a natural hazard, or support the administration or implementation of the permit, including conditions related to reporting, notification, monitoring, and compliance with the permit. That's the last slide for me, and I'll pass it over to Tyler.
Thanks, Ben. Yeah, so I will be kicking things off with our new administrative review process. So under the new regulation, the CA has to undertake an administrative review when requested by an applicant. There are specific circumstances when a review can be requested, including the applicant has submitted all information for a complete application and has not heard from us in the first 21 days. The applicant disagrees with our decision that the application is incomplete, or the applicant believes that the NVCA's request for further information is not reasonable. We must undertake these administrative reviews within 30 days of receiving the request. And those reviews can result in the NVCA confirming the application is in fact incomplete or complete or confirm submission requirements. And I also want to flag that the applicant can, if the applicant disagrees with the outcome of our review, there is no further appeal mechanism. Next slide, please. So there's also some changes to our permits and hearings. Another change is that the authority or the board has the ability to delegate powers related to issuing or canceling permits or holding hearings to the authority's executive committee or any other person or body. Delegation of some of these new powers, such as issuing permits, has already been given to staff for some time at the NVCA, and more details on NVCA's approach can be found on the agenda item 12.3.4 in the consent agenda. Next slide, please. So there's also some changes to the period of validity, extensions, refusal, and hearings. So in terms of how long we can issue permits for, the authority now has the ability to issue all permits for up to a maximum period of validity, which is 60 months. Previously, permits were issued for either 24 months or 60 months, where it was deemed a project could not be reasonably completed within 24 months. I will note that the 60-month timeline includes any and all extensions. For example, if a permit is initially issued for 60 months, there is no extensions to be granted. Whereas if a permit is issued for 24 months, that can be extended for another 24 months or up to 60 months. Where the NVCA intends to refuse a permit, we must give the applicant notice of intent to refuse. The applicant then must request a hearing within 15 days of receiving that notice in writing. If no request is received, the authority can proceed with the refusal. Where that request is received, the NVCA must hold the hearing within a reasonable time and provide at least 5 days notice to the applicant. Next slide, please. So there's also some changes to our review timelines. So we now have 21 days to confirm a complete application following receipt of all application requirements and our permit review fee. Once we deem that permit application is complete, we have 90 days to make a decision for all applications. It's important to note that the 90-day timeline does not start until we have deemed that application is complete. So this goes for all minor and major permit applications. Before, we would have 30 days for a minor application and 90 days for a major, and it's now just all 90 days. Next slide, please. Sorry, excuse me. Under the new regulation, there's also a number of administrative requirements for the NVCA related to the development of policies and procedures. I will note that the NVCA has the board-approved planning and regulation guideline, which contains a number of required components. However, updates will be required for conformity with the new regulation. To give board members an idea of what these policies and procedure documents are, the NVCA must develop, for instance, pre-submission guidelines, administrative reviews, and procedures on our timelines. There's also a requirement for the NVCA to consult with the public and stakeholders during review or updates to these documents. Next slide, please. So now there is also a process for reconsideration of fees for permit applications. So in terms of our fees, which members are aware, are frozen for planning and permitting development fees in 2024. The Act has been amended to permit an applicant to request a reconsideration of a permit fee. When this occurs, the NVCA has 30 days to make this decision. If the NVCA fails to make a decision, the applicant can appeal to the OLT, and the NVCA can decide to confirm or vary the amount. When an application pays the fee further to NVCA's decision, they can state in writing that they're paying the fee under protest. When this is done, the applicant can then also, within 30 days, appeal the fee to the OLT. And then the OLT can, after the hearing, the OLT may dismiss the appeal, vary the amount, or order that no fee be charged. If that applicant has made the fee in protest, the OLT may order us to issue a refund. Next slide, please. So the NVCA retains the ability to cancel permits when conditions of the permit have not been met or other circumstances prescribed by the regulation exist. If we intend to cancel, we must send a notice to the permit holder with the date on which we intend to cancel the permit. The permit holder then has the ability to request a hearing related to the cancellation and must do so in writing within 15 days of receiving the intent to cancel. Like other hearings, a date must be set within a reasonable time frame, and the NVCA has the ability to confirm, rescind, or vary the decision. Similar to other hearings under the Act, if the applicant disagrees with the decision, they can appeal to the OLT within 90 days. Next slide, please. So there are a lot of changes related to our enforcement and offenses provisions under the CA Act, and this slide provides members with a high-level overview. Additional details can be found in agenda items 12.3.3 and 12.3.4. First, how we appoint officers has changed. This has moved from the appointment provisions within each CA's individual regulation to Section 30.1 of the Act. For our Section 28 officers, there has been some slight changes in how we may enter private property without a warrant. There are two main powers of entry related to either considering an application for a permit or compliance, where officers can figure out if a significant damage is occurring. For the latter, it is important that we meet all requirements outlined in the Act before entering property. I will note that these powers of entry do not enable NVCA staff to enter any building or dwellings or use any sort of force. We also have the new ability to issue stop orders under the Act. These are not identical for instance, stop work orders that the building code inspectors or bylaw officers have. And there are a number of requirements which must be met to issuing a stop order. For instance, the officer forming reasonable grounds that a contravention of the Act, regulation, or conditions of a permit has occurred, and the activity is likely or is likely to cause significant damage. And so what is sort of remaining the same under enforcement and offenses? Enforcement of the Act and regulations is still undertaken by designated NVCA officers. We retain the ability to obtain search warrants where necessary, and the statute of limitation period is still 2 years. So this is the period in which prosecution can be initiated for an offense. Next slide, please. Lastly, members of the board are familiar with NVCA's reporting on permit timelines. Our mandatory program and service regulation has been amended with requirements to prepare an annual report related to permit statistics and compliance with the new regulation 41-24. This report must be made public on an annual basis and will reflect those new timelines we spoke about earlier. Next slide, please. So thank you for your time today to discuss the changes. I will reiterate that additional details can be found in reports 12.3.3 and 12.3.4, and I'll invite Ben Kroll, Manager of Development and Planning, back for any questions.
Thank you very much, Ben and Tyler, for that presentation. As Tyler mentioned, we already have had a request to pull item 12.3.3. So we will be discussing it further there, but I will open the floor to any questions at this time. If any of our members have any questions or comments that they wanted to put forward right now. Okay, I have Councillor Belanger and Councillor Baines that I see, and Councillor Manklow. Okay. Councillor Belanger? You're muted. Sorry.
Automatically. Okay. You've outlined all of the legislation, but you haven't given us any indication as to the impact on the authority and your ability to meet the legislation. Given, I'm assuming that, some of these things could require more labor intensive with shorter timelines or these types of things. But, the budget process was much earlier. So what is the feeling of the authority as far as meeting the requirements of the legislation?
Yeah, through the chair. At this point, yeah, we've been adapting our processes. With this, the new regulation was really not much of a surprise. We kind of anticipated these changes, and we've been trying to make changes to our internal processes to adapt for this new regulation and some of the timelines that are involved. With regards to deeming the application complete, this is going to be one of the things that we're going to need to, we've adapted our process. We're going to have point people reviewing with technical staff, ensuring that all submission requirements are outlined very early in the process and can be issued to the applicant within that 21-day period. With regards to the 90-day turnaround, we're just going to be utilizing our internal processes as best as possible to streamline reviews. We have technical triage meetings. There's other different things that we can do to kind of streamline different projects, but we're hopeful that it will be a balance with this reduction in regulated area versus the volume of applications that we receive, that we'll be able to meet the timelines that have been prescribed by the province.
Thank you.
Thank you. So next I have Councillor Baines.
Thank you. I have a similar question as Councillor Belanger's, and that is, surely there's a pattern to all these permits coming in, so that, for instance, in the month of May, it must be just rush hour there with all the permits flooding in. Is there a pattern when you look at the year? And if so, how is it that you staff up appropriately in order to hit this rush hour of permit requests?
So there's really no additional staff that we have. Is just a matter of utilizing our internal processes to the best of our ability, which we have triage sessions with technical staff that can look through some of these lower risk type applications. You're exactly right. In the spring, that's the time that we'll see a lot more of these minor permit applications, and we try to utilize permit blitz days and different things like that, just to be able to look at these quick and easier files and get them out the door as quick as possible, so we can spend our time on some of the more complex, challenging files.
Thank you.
Thank you. I actually have Councillor Manklow next before Councillor Porter. So we'll go to Councillor Manklow, please.
Thank you, Ben and Tyler. That's a helpful review. One of the things that stands out to me is the changes from 100 meters to 30. I'd like to have your assessment of how this will affect the health of our waterways and any other ecological effects that might occur.
Who
So
would like to? Okay. Sorry,
Yeah.
go ahead, Ben.
through the chair. So right now, we're not really sure of the potential impacts of this change. Potentially, there could be some hydrologic impacts potentially on larger scale developments, but we're hopeful that we'll be able to mitigate them in one way, shape, or form. But yeah, we're at this time. We're not expecting any of these smaller type developments to really have any significant impact with the reduction of the area that we're regulating. It would just be more so potentially with the larger scale developments.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Porter.
Yes, thank you. And through the chair, I just want to ask a question about the pre-consultation and respect to the 90-day turnaround, because we've had a couple of planners come, both in the Committee of Adjustment, which I attend for information, and then council per se, that says, well, we haven't had time to get the comments back from the Conservation Authority. So what I'm thinking, and I just like to have confirmed, is now the question would be, did you request a pre-consultation? So were you informed? And if not, perhaps it's because we did deny one because they didn't have their information in time. So I'm just wondering around the importance of the pre-consultation in really letting planners get their ducks in a row.
Yeah, through the chair. So all our planners, they're acutely aware of the importance of providing early consultation because it significantly improves the submissions that they get. As part of that, we've been adjusting our roles and responsibilities to make the team more resilient as well and build capacity among the team. So we've been engaging the team members with additional training as well. So our former regulation staff are now receiving the planning training. So we always have lots of different people that can look at things in the event that one person is overloaded. So we're trying to build in a little bit of redundancy or just cross functionality between the teams, just to allow staff to be able to step up and respond to these requests.
May I follow up?
Certainly, go ahead. Yes.
Right. So yes, I mean, I was definitely through the chair putting the onus on the planners doing the development to get their ducks in a row. The other question, because we was talking with the chair of the Committee of Adjustment yesterday, and is there going to be a bit like a Coles Notes cheat sheet of all of the changes available? Because they were wondering, because they sometimes have to deal with things.
So we've provided a letter to all our municipal partners and stakeholders with regards to the changes, but if there's somebody in particular that hasn't received it, then please let us know and we can follow up with that letter.
I'll make sure that filters down. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Deputy Mayor Van Staveren.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have a few questions actually. The mapping update that's going to be done annually, will we be encouraging all the townships to start utilizing the same mapping system? I mean, obviously, if we're updating it annually, it's an up-to-date version, whereas some of our townships may not be using current versions. It's going to make our process pretty streamlined. That's one question. The other question I have is in regards to the online ponds. We're going to run into a bit of a conundrum because we're going to have a lot of people saying it's for livestock or agricultural purposes, whereas people will still be able to still require permits from the local municipality and the NVCA. I'd like Ben just to talk about that a bit. The other question is in regards to the need for a permit to maintain or repair roads. I was under the understanding that townships did not need permits to do that. So can you tell us what the change in that regards is? And the fourth question, the administrative review, I know we're in the process of determining how that process is going to work. My only concern is I want to make sure a higher authority does the review as opposed to the person who approved the permit in the first place. So if you could speak to those questions, please.
All right, through the chair. With regards to your first question, with regards to mapping, our mapping is going to be made available. Any updates, if there are housekeeping changes or anything significant, they're going to be made available to our municipal partners to be able to utilize. Those maps may not necessarily reflect some of the maps that have been included within their official plans, but we're just going to it'll really emphasize the need for greater communication and build that relationship with all municipal partners to ensure that they have and they're utilizing the most up-to-date mapping.
I wish everybody would use all the same maps. Ben, you know it, we get into problems from time to time, and I love the idea of everybody using the same information. So, okay.
Yeah.
As far as the online ponds,
yeah, with regards to the online ponds, so online ponds is not something that is exempt from the permit. If it is online, it would still it would require a trigger.
I shouldn't say online. I should say offline ponds is a concern, right? The offline ponds. People who have an offline pond and it's not for agriculture will still need a permit.
If it's within a regulated area, yes. Yeah.
Okay. And as far as road maintenance.
Sorry, just to go back to the last question with regards to ponds. If an offline pond, not for agricultural purposes, yeah, that's something that that will require a permit. So I know the province will be monitoring this for effectiveness as well. So potentially there could be some additional changes down the road.
Well, it's a bit of a it's going to be what it's a for, sort of thing. But okay, as far as do we need permits now to maintain roads?
So our process is going to stay the same with our municipal partners and the process that we've been working under before. So it's nothing's going to be changing necessarily because of our agreements with municipalities and what we're looking at and what we're permitting from them. And any of those works that are outlined, they're exempt from permits anyway. So nothing is going to be changing with that regard.
And that's why I found it odd that they put it into legislation that we do no longer need a permit to maintain our roads. Well, we haven't needed one to maintain our roads for maintenance purposes. So, okay. And as far as the administrative review on applications, who will be approving the reviews?
With the administrative review, that's so we've provided a staff report with the appointment of officers that also
we saw that,
yeah. So some of the different administrative reviews, but the intention is we've outlined potentially a CAO, director, or manager. So the idea was for any decisions to be at arm's length. So if I was involved in any sort of application, then I would not be the one making that decision.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mayor Horner?
Yes, through you, Madam Chair. My question was, when we take a look at the items that are on the exemption list, what percentage of those items have we currently been dealing with the authority? Like, what percentage of our time has been taken with those items that are now on the exemption list?
It's tough through the chair. It's tough to give an exact percentage, but we do see a lot of applications for accessory buildings, that type of thing. And the exception for this one would be if it's located within a water course or a wetland. So in some cases, not all those types of exempted activities will be off our plate. We'll still be looking at different ones that are potentially within erosion hazards, that type of thing. So we haven't really done a deep dive into that analysis to determine what the percentage of applications would be, but we're extremely supportive of being as practical and pragmatic as possible. And no, I appreciated those recommendations from the province.
Yeah, because I think I certainly see that, the removal of a need of a permit for a detached porch area, if it's or a deck area, whatever it's called. So I would think that this would lessen your workload a wee bit, and that work could be directed to some other areas that are going to need more attention then.
Yeah, through the chair, that's the hope.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Belanger, and I see Director Ibert has some. Did you wish to comment just before we go to Councillor Belanger?
Sure, just through the chair, just to add, we have had some, we don't call them exceptions, but pre-approvals of smaller, lower risk things like floating docks, like decks that are things that are not in the hazard. So what the province does sort of complements that quite well. The additional thing that Manager Kroll noted was the reconstruction of non-hapless structures and potentially in the floodplain. And we just want to make sure our municipal partners are aware of that, we may or may not be being involved in some of those, and it would fall more on the CBO. But I think Manager Kroll's covered that quite well.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Belanger, did you have another question?
Yeah, not a question. I was just further to Mayor Porter's comment. I was going to suggest I am forwarding the presentation to our planning department, because when you talk about a sort of a Reader's Digest version, it hits all the highlights without being as extensive as a report. So I think the two in combination would be positive.
Yes, thank you. And I'm sure our NVCA staff will be more than willing to provide a personal update to any of our member municipalities if requested. Director, did you are muted. You're muted.
Through the chair, if I may make a comment, I think it's pertinent to this discussion.
Certainly.
I just want to point out that through Conservation Ontario, we've been very proactive in reporting to timelines, and we produce annual information that's set out. We've actually challenged the 90-day timeline to a 60-day timeline. So when we do that evaluation, we provide that information to you. Currently on the 90-day timeline for all 30 to 90-day permits, we're at 97%. That's where we are. That's the reality of our work. You guys all hear about the rotten eggs, the ones that are slow, but factor that into 97% compliance. We're still doing extremely well at this. And I think that's really, really important to hear. And just to clarify on that administrative hearing, I will be the chair of that. I don't actively play a role. I purposely try not to play an active role in the permitting process, so I can be a standalone party that can help evaluate. And we are trying very diligently to keep Chris in that similar position where if he can, he sort of stays out and just we both act as a commenting agency. So that's where we go to there. So I think we can provide that neutrality that Ben spoke to. I think that's important. That's what I've got. Sorry.
Councillor Belanger.
Thank you. To the CAO's comments, I think some of the challenge is not so much in the timeline from a deemed completed application. It's the process from receiving an application form at being deemed completed. And we've had a lot of dialogue on this. It's certainly in a lot of parties, a lot of cases, it's third-party delays and all kinds of things. But if you recall, I had suggested quite some time ago that we measure the date of receipt to the date of deemed completion, because I think that's where there needs to be some streamlining. Great pre-consultation will certainly condense that, but I have heard from many parties that It's the delays from when additional information is requested and then returned to the NVCA. And then it could be 3 or 4 weeks prior to getting a response from the additional information. And that's not a criticism. It's just timelines. But I think to say we're in 97% compliance from completion, that's not the whole story. We really have to streamline from receipt of application to deemed complete.
Okay, thank you for your comments. Oh, Director Head.
Through the chair, if I may, to Councillor Belanger, thank you very much for those comments, Joe. And I know, yes, you and I have personally had lots of conversations on this topic. It's not a problem that way. I think that the steps that we took this year in our budgetary process to bring on more planners is going to really help. I want to point out that we have just landed a very excellent planner in that we actually scooped somebody. We have the former manager of planning from the county of Simcoe has now joined our staff. He was a former employee of the NVCA, and he's worked for 18 years for Simcoe County. So we're very happy to have Greg Merrick in our area. He brings a really broad understanding of the watershed. I think he brings some abilities that will just really accent the great work that Ben and his team are doing. And I know Ben's really looking forward to working with him on that matter. But on the 97% piece, like that is the reality. And what you speak to on the piece of delay, that is the reality. Like we get it all the time. It's like it's really challenging. And I know when we talked about budget, and I said we could get more and more planners, but this problem is not going to go away. To a degree, it's never going to go away. Like, because there's always that file that just is delinquent. It just doesn't happen. Like, you get material come in, you review it, you send it back, and then it may take forever. You hear about it because when they send it back after 90 days or 100 days or 200 days, we waited 200 days. Well, you waited 201 days and you waited 1 out of the 200 days. Like that's the challenge that we face. You don't always hear that, and I just have to defend it at times. And I'm sorry I'm defending it, but when we're wrong, we're wrong. When we're right, we're right. And we're going to work really hard, and we're really, really appreciative of getting this new staffing in here. It's vital and it's important.
Okay, thank you. I don't see any further questions or comments at this time. So we do have a proposed resolution moved by Councillor Belanger, seconded by Councillor Cox, that the board members receive this presentation as presented. So if there's no discussion about that, I would ask that you go to your onboard to cast your vote.
Through the chair, that motion has carried.
Thank you very much. As this item will be pulled as well, so we will have perhaps some more discussion on it. There are no deputations or hearings today. So we have had requests to pull the following items: 12.3.1, 12.3.3, and 12.3.7. Are there any other items that members wish to have pulled for further discussion? I'm not seeing any hands. So we will move to item number 11. Oh, sorry, I'm sorry, it also has 12.3.6. I missed that one. So there are 4 items that we have on our list. So resolved that agenda item numbers 12.3.1, 12.3.3, 12.3.6, and 12.3.7 be pulled, and further that all consent list agenda items not referred for separate discussion be adopted and submitted to the board as submitted to the board and staff, and be authorized, and staff be authorized to take all further necessary action required to give effect to same. And further, that any items in the consent list not referred for separate discussion and for which conflict has been declared are deemed not to have been voted on or discussed by the individual making the declaration. So unless there's any further discussion on that, if you could all go to your onboard again to cast your vote, that would be appreciated.
Through the chair, that motion is carried.
Thank you very much. So that takes us to item 12.3.1. And I believe Councillor Baines had a question regarding this item.
To you, Chair, and to all, not a question, just a suggestion, if you will. It's the wannabe English teacher in me. I came up with the suggestion to change one verb in one report. And other than that, it's a well-written report, and this one particular. So thank you. And I think staff agreed with my suggestion. So
could you just highlight for us what you wish to have changed?
Yes, it was in point 3 of Ian's report. Let's see, I don't have it all here with me. It was changing the word advice to either consult or develop. That was it as a verb. So a very small point, but it just shows that board members actually do read all these reports word for word. Thank you.
Well, thank you. And you're correct that word can make a difference. So I believe that is okay with staff to make that change then. So, okay. So we then would look at voting on item 12.3.1. We have a recommendation moved by Councillor Fisher, seconded by Councillor Porter. Resolved that the Board of Directors receive staff report number 010224 BOD regarding the 2022 to 2025 NVCA Climate Change Action Plan Summary of Progress in 2023 and 2024 goals for information. Any discussion? If not, could you please go to your onboard and cast your vote?
Through the chair, that motion is carried.
Well, that was very fast. Okay, so the next item we have is 12.3.3, and Councillor Belanger requested, had some questions regarding this item. But before we go to Councillor Belanger, I wanted to go to Director Ibert. Did you want to make any further comment or on this particular item?
Yes, thank you through the chair. I was just listening to Councillor Baines' comments of being an English teacher. I was reading through it last night and she said, I hope my English teacher isn't reading this. So I apologize for anything there. But there's a couple of things. This is lots of moving pieces with these changes, and we're trying to get everything in front of the board. So a couple of things I just wanted to update, and then I will turn it to Manager Kroll just in case he wants to add anything. We did send a document out today. It just to indicate, and it is, I believe, referenced in the report. It talks about transition, how we will treat applications that have come in before April 1st, and how we will treat applications after April 1st. Both permit applications and planning. It's just to provide clarity, both internal staff or if there's questions from applicants or our municipal partners. We've also included interim policy or guidelines that we want to, for the time being, use. Our hope is to come back to the board over the next few months and bring a variety of different documents for your approval, basically housekeeping changes that we want to make to current procedures. And at some point also bring forward to the board our mapping. I thought it was a great question from our Clearview member on mapping. We do make sure our mapping is available to both the counties and the municipalities, but we're looking at other tools to do that as well. Basically like an online portal, so the latest information. I don't know if the board wants me to go through that document that was provided this morning, but I would note that it's I think it's pretty straightforward that we're trying to use the latest in legislation, but also be mindful that there are some historic applications that are in front of us. The information that's sort of in the report, in the attachments, save and accept the legislation, has been provided to us by Conservation Ontario. They've been doing a great job to guide all 36 authorities along this path, and there's more information still coming in. For example, I know the report wasn't pulled to 12.3.4 about officers, but I would note we were waiting for the ministry to make sure that we could be provincial offences officers, and they've updated that information. I think it was shown as work in progress or under review. That's been done. So those are the kind of things I just wanted to update and provide to the board. And if there's questions, we'll go through whatever you need us to go through. I'll turn it over to Ben in case he wants to add anything. I know he's had that great presentation and has covered a lot of this information.
Yeah, through the chair. I think, yeah, you hit all the highlights there, Chris, and the board can expect additional staff reports with all our procedural guideline updates, updates to our feed policy, as well as the mapping, and that'll all be forthcoming, which Chris mentioned.
Okay, thank you very much. Oh, Director, sorry, CAO Hefner.
All I can say is I hope I don't get a pay cut as a result of my CEO to.
Sorry, I think I've done it wrong all morning, so.
No problem. Just want to point out, you're seeing these documents now because the regs dropped, but we've been reacting to this since the legislation passed. So, you know, it's not, we're just rushing out to do it now and going to throw all this information at you. We've been discerning this and looking at how we're going to adapt for over a year. So just want to make sure you understand that, because it's, and we need your involvement as well. So it's so important that if you have questions, fire them, because we need your input, and thank you for it today.
Okay, thank you. And just before I go to Councillor Belanger, I just did want to express my appreciation and the board's appreciation for all the work that the staff is putting into this to go over these changes, to implement them, to make sure that they're working appropriately. So thank you to all our staff for that. So Councillor Belanger, did you wish to address the issue?
No, the level of discussion after the presentation suffices for everything I needed to clarify.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you. Are there any other questions or concerns on this report that anyone has? I don't see any hands. So we will go to the motion, which I have as moved by Mayor White and seconded by Mayor Anderson. Resolved that the Board of Directors receive and approve staff report number 030224 BOD regarding legislative and regulatory proposals affecting conservation authorities. Any further discussion? If not, I would ask that you go to your onboard to cast your vote, and we'll move on as soon as we have the results.
Through the chair, that motion has carried.
Thank you very much. And thank you again to everyone for all the work on this item. The next item that was pulled is 12.3.6. So I don't know who wanted to pull that. Oh, Councillor Belanger?
Yes, thank you, through the chair. In this report, that it indicates that there's a cost associated with the recommended work for 2024 of 140,000, but in fact it was 280,000, with 140,000 being provided in funding from WECI, but the report indicated that that funding has not yet been announced. So I had two questions. Is one, like, is that an assured level of funding that we absolutely are going to get, or is if we don't get that funding, we only can do half of the work this year? And then my second question is, when it comes to these flood structures, is that deemed to be the ownership of the combined 16 municipalities in 2 cities, and we all contribute on a scale, or however that's worked out, or when we look at other infrastructure, I believe like culverts and that type of thing, it's a responsibility of the municipality. So I just wanted some clarity of how those costs are spread across the watershed, across all municipalities, and whether or not that 140,000 funding is a sure thing, or we don't know.
Okay, thank you. I welcome Manager Ali. I welcome this. This is the first time I think you've joined us.
Absolutely.
So welcome, and I will turn that over to you to answer those questions.
Thank you, Chair Little, and through you, Chair Little, to Councillor Belanger. Those are excellent questions. So regarding your first question, the funding through WECI or the Water and Erosion Control Infrastructure Program, the funding there is not guaranteed, unfortunately. So as with any grant applications or programs, we would submit an application and then, hear back from the province, specifically through their WECI committee, which includes representatives from conservation authorities that evaluate the various projects that are proposed by different conservation authorities relating to water and erosion control infrastructure. So it isn't a guarantee. It isn't, a 100% certainty that we would receive that funding. That being said, in the past, we have had a fairly positive degree of success in terms of the projects that we have submitted for application as part of the WECI program. So, in general, our outlook is fairly positive in terms of receiving that funding. That being said, I would say some of our understanding of the costs required to maintain some of our flood control infrastructure, especially the 6 that are listed in this report, it kind of presents a bit of a different picture in terms of the longer term outlook for some of our water and erosion control infrastructure. So in terms of the costs you see, I think those are high numbers. They're significant numbers. And so in terms of how that would get folded into our WECI program funding applications moving forward, I think is something that the engineering team, will need to consider in the future moving forward. Obviously, we would not necessarily submit an application to cover all of that funding at once to, essentially to better our chances of success at receiving the funding. So we would need to essentially put together a plan to prioritize what actions need to happen sooner rather than later, which can, wait potentially 5 years, which can, then wait a little bit longer than that. Now, the nice thing about having formal dam safety reviews completed is that the recommendations are all presented in terms of immediate, high, medium, and low priority, and there are time intervals associated with those designations. So typically medium and high priority, immediate and high priority items would need to be addressed within essentially immediately or within a 2-year period. Medium priority items can wait about 5 years. And then lower priority items can typically happen anytime within the next decade or so. So that's one of the nice things about having a formal dam safety review completed. Number one, it's completed by an objective third party. Number two, it gives us that listing of recommendations based on, a prioritized kind of time interval. So we can use those considerations to then figure out how are we going to kind of leverage the WECI program funding over a multi-year period to both meet better chances of success in terms of the funding applications, as well as tackle these items in a sequential way based on their priorities. So absolutely, it's not guaranteed at the end of the day. And I do think a lot of CAs are kind of in the same position that we are. We have aging infrastructure that requires increasingly more dollars to maintain. And the challenge is, unfortunately, there just isn't enough provincial funding for the flood program to kind of meet those requirements. And I think more and more conservation authorities are relying more heavily on the WECI program to supplement that funding shortfall. So hopefully that answers question number one. Regarding question number two, the ownership of these structures. Now, this one is a really tricky one, and I think potentially my answer to the question will get a little bit philosophical. So technically, us as the Conservation Authority, we are responsible for the maintenance and operation of these flood structures. That being said, the nature of these flood structures has kind of evolved over time, such that some of them potentially might not be considered strictly flood structures anymore. The reservoirs that they hold back, could potentially be used for recreational purposes in certain cases. And so, whether they can strictly be called flood structures, I think it is an important part of the designation, because at the end of the day, if they weren't there, there would be flooding downstream if we take them out, right? So there is that important consideration there. But in general, there are other uses associated with them in certain cases in our watershed. I can note, New Lowell, the New Lowell Dam is one example. There's a campground on those lands, and the lands group and stewardship group kind of takes care of some of those aspects. And the other example is the Tottenham Dam in New Tecumseh. For that dam, I think the township has some kind of potential recreational interests there around kind of the reservoir area. So the nature of these structures has changed. Ultimately, within the legislation, the NVCA is responsible for their maintenance and management. But I think moving forward, and especially considering the funding requirements of these structures as they age, I do think it necessitates an important discussion with the municipalities in which these structures are located, to understand what the municipal interest is, whether the municipality would be, willing to contribute or undertake some kind of collaborative approach to continue maintaining these structures, or whether there might be any considerations or interests on the municipality's part to start kind of investigating the potential of decommissioning these structures. What that looks like in terms of costs, I think, a lot of the asset management discipline, I would say, is kind of still in its infancy as far as public agencies are concerned. So in terms of, long-term through the full life cycle of these structures, what the costs of maintaining them up to the end of their life will look like versus the cost of decommissioning, I would say if we take a long-term perspective, ultimately, most likely the decommissioning work would come in at a lower number of dollars, I would say, than maintaining those structures up to their end of life. That being said, the decommissioning will require more of an influx of funding kind of on the front end, as opposed to kind of the maintenance of these structures over their lives, which, will take up to, 2 to 3 more decades potentially. So there's all these really complex requirements, I think, in terms of funding, infrastructure management and maintenance. And it's not really straightforward to kind of untangle those. But I think the first question to answer would be, what are the municipal interests relating to these structures, so that the NVCA can kind of carve out a more clear path moving forward for these structures that also aligns with municipal interests. Now, whether this kind of further to your question, Councillor Belanger, whether this is essentially an ask of one municipality versus all municipalities in the watershed, that does get a little bit tricky, because although these structures are located within a specific municipality, they might receive drainage from a watershed perspective or a sub-watershed perspective from areas potentially outside that municipality. So at what point we consider these structures as belonging to a single municipality versus, meeting a purpose that goes beyond that municipality, including to the upstream areas that, drain to these structures, that's also another complicated question to untangle, I think. Potentially not all municipalities have, receive some kind of benefit if we look at the full upstream and downstream picture. But I would say, probably it's not as straightforward as looking at strictly the location in which these structures are located if we start to take a watershed perspective on it. I hope that answers your question, and I'm happy to address any follow-up questions.
Councillor Blanchet? You're muted. You're muted. Sorry.
Just in follow-up, then I would suggest that when there is a decision made on the wiki funding, that maybe this come back to the board so that we have an understanding. Because if memory serves me right, the recommended work for 2024 was all within the 2-year parameter, more immediate needs. So we don't want to get a pent-up demand where the budget is constantly not allowing us to do work that is required in a timely manner. As far as my second one is, again, there's, dams are just one level of infrastructure. I think other infrastructure that is also impacted by the entire watershed, like culverts, tends to be truly the responsibility of the municipality, even though the flow has a direct impact on the size of culverts and all those types of things. So it was just a question of whether or not we are looking at all of the fairness in how we distribute costs for the maintenance of all these items. So again, as you say, it's complex, and it's something that probably should be looked at over time. So that's all. Hopefully this will come back to the board once we have an understanding of what the funding has come in at. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anyone else have any questions on this particular item? Again, I don't see any hands. So we have a proposed resolution moved by Councillor Harvey, seconded by Mayor White. Be resolved that the Board of Directors receive staff report number 060224 BOD regarding the 2024 work plan and key near-term considerations for NVCA's flood structures. Any discussion? If not, I would ask that you go to your onboard and cast your vote. Thank you.
Through the chair, that motion is carried.
Oh, again, very quick. Okay. The last item to be pulled is item 12.3.7, which I guess I pulled so that CAO Hebner can provide us with an update on the MOUs. So I will ask CAO Hebner to go ahead with that. Thank you.
Thank you. And through the chair, this will be short and sweet, but I just wanted to make some announcements here. We met with Clearview's council within this month, and it's at the clerk to be signed. It should have been signed already. They needed a clean copy. It's been sent to Sasha, the clerk, and we expect that information to come back to us. So it will be executed and signed. Springwater Council on the 20th was consented to be approved. It is currently with the clerk and mayor for execution and signing. So that makes 17 out of 18. Cheryl and I went and presented our budget to the Oro-Medonte Council along with Lake Simcoe and SSCA on Wednesday, the 13th of this month. And council had questions. Our situation in Oro-Medonte is probably the most complicated when it comes to an MOU situation, because our MOU for planning and advisory has a historical fiscal rebate that's calculated annually. In 2023's budget deliberations, we advised council at that time under Mayor Harry Hughes that we would not intend to carry forward with the rebate. We felt that the process for the calculation for the rebate was challenging. We'd never really received clear explanation as to how that calculation came. It has some rather dated history back to 2011. We've since met with staff, CAO planning staff at Oromadante, and we're working to separate the two documents. The planning advisory document will continue forward, and we can negotiate that. That's the $42,000 potential update. It doesn't have an impact on budget because when this program was set up, those funds come out of reserves, so it doesn't affect the budget from our perspective. It would have an impact on Oromadante's budget. We presented them, or we will be presenting them with a calculation that we feel works, and in true respect to partnership, it's good for it works. We have to be fair to all parties. And so we're presenting information that we hope to have back to them by later this afternoon or early Monday morning. And their planning team will be bringing a document forward. So we're looking at them to look independently at the Category 3 items. They also had concerns about understanding what Category 2 and Category 3 actually was. Municipally delivered or board delivered is essentially the difference between those two items. So we're left with one MOU, and we'll have confirmation probably on that at that council meeting next week with Oromadante. So those are my updates. This has been a laborious process, and the interesting thing is some of us have signed up for a 5-year agreement with an annual rollover. Others have a 1-year agreement. So in about 3 months, I'm going to get the horse and pony show going again and have to replay this game all over again. So we really need to work on that verbiage in our documents that allow for the document to continue on if everyone is in agreement, rather than having to go back through the process of trying to get into a council meeting, because that became challenging. Timing to get us into meetings. You know, you'd get moved from meeting to meeting. It's a challenge. And I think once we get through the process and people really understand, maybe it can improve. But that's my update. And I'll be making the final change to the report, and presenting the information to the chair for her consent and approval so that the board's aware of it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. And I just wanted to thank all our members for their efforts and support in taking these memorandums of understanding back to their councils and working on getting them signed and agreed to, etc. So thank you all for your role in this work. So we now then have staff report, item 12.3.7, the staff report. There is a resolution that is moved by Councillor Mantelo and seconded by Councillor Belanger. And that's resolved that the Board of Directors receive and approve staff report number 070224 BOD regarding the final of MOU cost apportioning agreement programs and services. And further, that the CAO will provide final changes to this staff report and the final transition report attached concerning, I guess we can, concerning Oromadante's MOU at this time, for the chair's approval prior to the March 31st, 2024 submission to the Minister in Office of the MNRF. Is there any discussion on that motion? If not, I would ask that you then cast your vote with the on board.
That motion is carried.
Thank you very much. So that brings us to the end of our consent agenda. We do have item 13, other business. Is there any other business that anyone has for today? I don't. Oh, Vice Chair Scott.
So I thought I'd just briefly share last Friday, the federal special advisor for water, Terry Duguid, who's an MP from Winnipeg, was on the shores of Lake Simcoe highlighting the Freshwater Action Fund in the first round of applications, which closed today on World Water Day. And our Conservation Authority had advocated for that in advance of last year's federal budget. So it was nice to see things come full circle a year later, just in time for World Water Day today. And it was good news. It's $650 million for 11 bodies of water plus the Great Lakes, and the projects and the applications are going to be evaluated on the merits to decide ways to improve our water quality. So all in all, a good news announcement that I thought I'd share.
Great. Thank you very much. That is good news to hear. Anything further that anyone wishes to bring forward? Again, I don't see any hands. So that does bring us to number 14, motion to adjourn. So we have a move by Councillor Porter and seconded by Councillor Baines. Resolved that the Board of Directors adjourn at 10:19 a.m. to meet again on April the 26th, 2024 at the call of the chair. I don't remember, Director Flanagan, is our next meeting online or in person?
Through the chair, it's in person. It's when we're having our auditor come to deliver our 2023 financial statements.
Okay, so we hope to see everybody at the Tiffin Center on April the 26th. So if you could all just go to your onboard and cast your vote for this final item, I expect it will pass.
The chair, it's passed.
Well, thank you all very much for participating today, and we will hopefully see you in April. Have a great weekend. Enjoy this new snow, and we'll see you again.